forced to marry a paralyzed man, until her kiss made him stand for love. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. She was forced to marry a man who could no longer walk, but what her kiss awakened, no one expected. The sound of soft piano echoed through the grand hall of the Blake estate. Gold chandeliers glimmered above, and the air smelled faintly of roses and expensive perfume. Every guest looked picture-perfect except for the bride. Lila Anderson's hands trembled as she clutched the bouquet. Her pale pink dress fit perfectly, yet her heart felt like it did not belong here. Across the aisle sat Ethan Blake, the man she had been ordered to marry. 32 years old, heir to a billion-dollar tech empire, and bound to a wheelchair since the plane crash that nearly killed him. His expression was unreadable, sharp jaw framed by quiet defiance. Cameras flashed around him, desperate to capture the sight of the tragic wedding between wealth and pity. "Do you, Miss Anderson, take this man?" The priest's words blurred into background noise. Her throat felt dry. Somewhere in the back of the room, she could almost hear her mother's voice. "We have no choice, Lila. They are paying for the hospital and the house." A tear threatened to fall, but she held it back. "I do," she whispered. Ethan's turn came. "I do." The words were flat, rehearsed, but his eyes flickered just for a second when they met hers. "Then you may kiss the bride." Silence filled the hall. Lila froze. The cameras leaned in, hungry. Ethan's wheelchair creaked slightly as he turned toward her. For a moment, she saw something human behind his mask: pain, pride, exhaustion. She leaned down, hesitating only an inch from his lips. The world held its breath. Her lips touched his. Just a brush, barely there, but his hand twitched. A monitor from the hidden medical device under his sleeve flickered, a small beeping sound that no one noticed except his nurse. When she pulled away, his gaze had changed. It was not just surprise, it was life. The crowd erupted into applause, the sound hollow, echoing through marble and crystal. Lila straightened, forcing a faint smile, playing her role as the dutiful wife. She felt the cold weight of the ring on her finger heavy, like a chain of gold. Outside, rain began to fall, streaking against the tall windows. She turned her face toward the glass and thought, "So this is what it feels like to sell your future." Later that night, the grand house was silent except for the low hum of machines. Lila stood by the window of the master suite, the city lights glowing far below. Ethan was across the room, seated in his chair near the fire. His voice broke the stillness. "You do not have to pretend when it is just us," he said. She turned. "Pretend what? That you wanted this." Her heart clenched, but she hid it well. "Do you?" His jaw tightened. "Wanting has nothing to do with it. This marriage is a contract, Miss Anderson. 12 months. You follow the rules, and you will never have to worry about money again." "I never asked for your money," she said quietly. "No," he replied, eyes narrowing. "You just needed to save your mother. That is noble, but it still makes you mine for a year." Lila looked at him, at the man everyone called heartless. Underneath the arrogance, she saw something else: loneliness. His fingers trembled slightly on the armrest, the tremor he tried to hide. "I will play my part," she said, steadying her voice. "But do not mistake silence for surrender." He tilted his head, studying her. "Good. I do not need pity. I need honesty." Lightning flashed outside, casting fleeting light across his face. For a heartbeat, the air between them felt charged, almost alive. She did not know why, but she whispered, "You should get some rest." He smiled faintly, though it did not reach his eyes. "Rest is for those who can sleep." As she walked toward the adjoining room, her dress brushed lightly against his hand. That single touch sent a shiver through him, a spark that neither of them could explain. Behind her, Ethan whispered into the quiet, "Every time you touch me, your hands make me tremble." She paused at the doorway, but did not turn around. The fire crackled. The storm deepened. And somewhere between duty and desire, their impossible story had already begun. Days turned into weeks inside the Blake mansion, and silence became part of Lila's daily routine. The grand rooms echoed with the ticking of antique clocks and the soft hum of medical devices hidden behind golden curtains. She moved quietly through the hallways, unsure if she was a wife, a nurse, or just another contract signed by his lawyers. Every morning, Ethan's physical therapist arrived at 7. Lila would watch from the doorway as he struggled through the painful routine. His hands gripped the metal bars, his jaw tight with effort. Sweat rolled down his temple, and every failed attempt left a shadow of anger on his face. When the therapist left, he stayed by the window, staring at the rain that never seemed to stop. One morning, Lila walked in with a tray of coffee. "You should eat something," she said softly. "I am not hungry." His voice was low but sharp. "You skipped breakfast yesterday, too." He turned his chair slightly toward her. "Are you monitoring me now?" She hesitated, then set the cup down on the table beside him. "Someone has to care whether you do or not." He looked up at her, surprised by the quiet defiance in her tone. The tension between them was thick but not cruel. For the first time, he seemed unsure of what to say. That night, she found herself standing outside his study. Light spilled from the half-open door. Inside, Ethan was trying to pick up a photo frame that had fallen from his desk. His hand trembled. The frame clattered to the floor again. Without thinking, Lila stepped forward, bent down, and placed it back on the table. It was a picture of him before the crash, standing beside an aircraft, smiling freely. "You looked happy," she said. He laughed bitterly. "That man died the night the engine failed." "No," she whispered. "He is sitting right here, trying to remember how to live again." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The firelight painted his face in gold and shadow. Then he murmured, "Do you believe broken things can be fixed?" She looked straight at him. "Only if they want to be." Later that week, she found him in the physical therapy room alone. The therapist was gone, but Ethan was still there, gripping the bars again. His arms trembled, his face pale. "Ethan, stop, you will hurt yourself." "I have to try," he said between breaths. "I am tired of sitting down while the world looks at me like a tragedy." He pushed himself again and fell. The sound of the chair scraping the floor echoed through the room. Lila ran to him, kneeling beside him on the cold tiles. "You are not a tragedy," she said, voice trembling. "You are just human." He looked at her, chest heaving. "You talk as if you know what that means." She swallowed hard. "Maybe I do, because I am trapped too, just in a different way." Her confession hung in the air, raw and honest. He studied her face, seeing more than pity, something fierce and fragile at once. She helped him back into the chair, her hand steady despite her shaking breath. When she turned to leave, he said quietly, "Lila." She paused. "Thank you for not walking away." Her throat tightened, but she smiled faintly. "Do not thank me yet." As she left the room, Ethan stared at the spot where her hand had touched his shoulder. For the first time in a long while, he did not feel numb. The echo of her words stayed with him, soft, steady, and unbearably alive. Rain streaked down the tall windows of the Blake mansion as another week began. The world outside looked washed out, colorless, and cold, much like the lives of the two people living inside it. But something subtle had changed between them. Lila no longer avoided Ethan's gaze, and he no longer dismissed her presence. There was a quiet understanding now, a fragile peace built from exhaustion and small acts of kindness. One morning she found him in the library. He was trying to reach a book on the top shelf from his chair, his arm stretching but falling short by inches. Without a word, she stepped forward, pulled the book down, and handed it to him. Their hands brushed for only a moment, but he looked up and said, "I could have managed." "I know," she replied, "but it was faster this way." For the first time, a faint smile touched his lips. "You are impossible." "Thank you," she said, smiling back. That same afternoon, his lawyer arrived with a thin folder and a pen made of dark wood. The document inside was cold and clear rules for the marriage, revised and sealed. Ethan handed it to her without emotion. "These are the new terms," he said. "Clause 6, no personal involvement beyond appearances. We attend the public events, we live in separate rooms, and we maintain distance. The tabloids will not stop talking, but at least they will not have a story to destroy us with." Lila read in silence, her eyes scanning the page. When she reached the final line, she noticed something written in his own hand. "You are free to leave anytime you wish." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Why add this?" He looked away. "Because I do not want you here out of obligation." That night she could not sleep. She walked through the quiet halls and paused outside his room. The door was slightly open, light from the fireplace flickering across his face as he slept in the chair. His hands twitched from pain. She hesitated, then quietly stepped inside and adjusted the blanket over his shoulders. He stirred but did not wake. For the first time, she realized she wanted to stay not because of the contract, but because of him. The next morning, Ethan woke to the faint smell of coffee and found Lila reading beside the window. "You stayed up all night," he said. "I could not sleep," she replied, glancing over the city. "It is hard to rest in a house where every clock ticks louder than your thoughts." He chuckled softly, a sound she had never heard from him before. "You have a way with words." "Maybe that is all I have," she said. He paused. "No, you have something I lost a long time ago." "What is that?" "Hope." Their eyes met for a heartbeat that felt longer than it should. Then he looked away, his voice turning distant again. "There is a charity gala this Friday. We will have to attend together. It will be our first public appearance as husband and wife." Lila nodded, though the thought made her stomach tighten. She had never worn a dress worth more than her rent. On the night of the gala, the mansion buzzed with stylists and assistants. They pinned her hair, adjusted her gown, and painted confidence onto her face. When Ethan saw her in the hallway, he froze. She looked breathtaking, but what stunned him most was the way she carried herself, graceful, steady, no trace of fear. He offered his arm. "Shall we?" She nodded, slipping her hand into his. The contact felt strangely natural. At the event, lights flashed, cameras clicked, and whispers rippled through the crowd. "That is her, the girl who married the paralyzed CEO." The words burned her ears, but she held her chin high. Ethan moved beside her, his expression unreadable but proud. Midway through the evening, a photographer shouted, "Mr. Blake, over here! A smile, please!" Ethan turned his wheelchair, but the left wheel caught on the edge of the carpet. The chair lurched forward. Gasps filled the room. Without thinking, Lila dropped to her knees and steadied him. Her hands fixed the wheel in seconds. "Are you all right?" she whispered. "Yes," he said quietly, his eyes meeting hers. "Because you are here." Flashbulbs popped like fireworks, freezing the moment his wife on the floor beside him, her hand on his shoulder, the air thick with tension and awe. After that night, everything changed. The media did not mock them. Instead, they called her the woman who stood by him. Donations for his foundation tripled. But inside the mansion, silence returned, heavier this time. Days later, he called her into the study. "You embarrassed yourself for me," he said. "I protected you," she corrected. He sighed. "You could have let them see me fall." "It would have been easier." "I will not let you fall," she said firmly. "Not in front of them, not in front of me." His gaze softened. "Why do you care so much?" "Because no one ever cared for me that way," she said, voice breaking. The air grew still. For a moment neither spoke. Then Ethan reached for the coffee cup beside him and almost spilled it. Lila caught it in time, her hand brushing his. The tremor in his fingers stopped. He stared down at their joined hands. "You are not supposed to be this kind," he whispered. "And you are not supposed to be this alone," she answered. Later that evening, as she walked him to his room, he stopped her at the door. "Lila, if this was not a contract, would you still be here?" She hesitated. "Maybe, but you would not have let me in otherwise." He gave a quiet laugh, one that sounded almost like a sigh. "Then maybe I owe fate a thank you." When she left, he sat in the dim light, the flicker of fire reflecting in his eyes. His mind returned to that single moment at the gala, the way she knelt beside him, fearless and unashamed. For the first time since the accident, Ethan Blake did not see himself as a man broken beyond repair. He saw a woman who looked at him and did not see a chair, a contract, or a weakness. She saw a person worth saving. And that realization, more than any medicine or therapy, began to heal something deep within him, something no one else had ever reached. Weeks passed after the gala, but the moment everyone had seen the woman kneeling beside her husband continued to echo across the city. Magazines printed their picture under headlines like "The Beauty and the Broken Heir" and "A Marriage the World Cannot Understand." Inside the Blake mansion, life went on as if nothing had changed, yet everything felt different. Lila noticed it in small ways, the way Ethan no longer avoided her eyes, how he asked about her day, and how he began to laugh quietly but real. He also started pushing himself harder in therapy. Each morning she would find him in the rehabilitation room before sunrise, sweat darkening his gray shirt, his hands gripping the steel bars that helped him stand. "One more minute," he would mutter, and when he could not hold on any longer, she was always there to steady him. One afternoon, while she adjusted the straps on his braces, she said softly, "You do not have to punish yourself." He breathed hard, shaking his head. "If pain is the price of standing again, I will pay it." "And if you never do?" He looked at her, eyes sharp but honest. "Then at least I will know I tried with you here." She did not respond, but that single line followed her all day. That evening, A letter arrived from the Blake Foundation, inviting them to a televised charity dinner. Ethan hesitated. "It is for the hospital wing we built. If I go, it will look like I am using my story to raise sympathy. Or," Lila said, "it will show people that strength does not need to look perfect." He glanced at her, silent for a long time. "You are not the same woman I married." She smiled faintly. "And you are not the same man I met." On the night of the event, the city skyline shimmered like liquid glass. Cameras flashed as they entered the ballroom. Ethan in his black suit, Lila in a midnight blue gown that seemed to catch the light with every step. He maneuvered his wheelchair smoothly, confident now, no trace of the hesitation that once haunted him. As they moved through the crowd, people whispered but no longer pitied. Many came forward to shake his hand. "Mr. Blake, your speech last year inspired our clinic," one doctor said. Ethan nodded politely, but his eyes searched for Lila, who stood near the edge of the stage, talking with one of the guests. When their eyes met across the room, something unspoken passed between them, a connection no camera could capture. During the speech segment, the host invited Ethan to address the audience. A murmur spread through the hall. Lila could see the tension in his shoulders as he wheeled himself onto the stage. He adjusted the microphone and began, voice steady. "A year ago, I thought my life had ended. I believed strength meant control, and that losing it made me less of a man. But tonight, standing or sitting before you, I realize strength is not measured by what we can lift, but by who stands beside us when we cannot." The room went still. He paused, then turned his gaze toward Lila. "For me, that person is my wife." Applause filled the hall. Lila felt tears sting her eyes. After the event, as the guests left, Ethan stayed by the balcony overlooking the city. She joined him quietly. "That was brave," she said. He smiled faintly. "You gave me the words." For a while they said nothing. The city lights glittered below, and the soft wind tugged at her hair. Then he spoke again, his tone softer. "You know, I used to believe pity was the cruelest thing a person could offer. But I was wrong. Indifference is worse." Lila looked at him. "And what is kindness then?" "Risk," he said. "Because when someone cares, it gives you something to lose." Her breath caught. The way he looked at her in that moment was no longer polite or distant. It was raw, human, and alive. When they returned home, the mansion no longer felt like a cage. It felt lived in. Ethan's laughter echoed faintly down the corridors, and Lila began to paint again, using a small studio she had set up near the sunroom. One morning he found her there, surrounded by sketches of light and movement. "What is this?" he asked. She smiled. "A place for both of us to breathe." He rolled closer, studying the colors on her canvas, vibrant golds and deep blues, like dawn breaking through darkness. "Is that me?" She nodded. "It is the way I see you." He stared at the painting, speechless. "You make me look like I am standing." "Maybe you already are," she whispered. Days later, Ethan surprised her. He invited the therapy team to the house, but when they arrived, he dismissed them after a short session. Lila frowned. "You are ending therapy?" "No," he said with a half-smile. "Just changing my method." That afternoon, she found him in the gym, gripping the parallel bars again, alone. His arms trembled as he pushed himself upright. Sweat dripped down his neck, his breathing sharp and uneven. She rushed forward. "Ethan, stop. You will fall." "Then I will fall," he gasped, "but I will not stop trying." His legs shook violently. She moved to catch him, but he steadied himself for a brief, miraculous second, just long enough for his eyes to meet hers. Then he collapsed, and she caught him in her arms. She pressed a hand to his chest. "Why are you doing this to yourself?" "Because every time I fall, you are the one who helps me up." Her throat tightened. "You do not need me for that." He looked at her, voice breaking. "I do." The honesty in his tone hit her harder than she expected. She helped him back to the chair, hands trembling as she fastened the straps. Neither spoke. The air between them was charged with everything they could not say. That night, while he slept, Lila walked back into the therapy room, the faint smell of antiseptic mixed with the scent of metal. She looked at the bars he used to stand and whispered into the silence. "You will walk again, not because of me, but because you still believe you can." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. In another room, Ethan stirred, half awake, his hand brushing the edge of the empty chair beside him. He smiled faintly, unaware that just beyond the door, she was still there watching, protecting, and quietly falling in love with the man she had once sworn to never need. The first snow of winter blanketed the Blake estate in silence. It had been nearly 3 months since the gala, and the mansion no longer felt like a monument to tragedy. Lila had filled it with life-fresh flowers, faint music from the piano room, and laughter that echoed through the halls like sunlight after a storm. Yet beneath the warmth, a quiet fear had begun to grow. Ethan was changing. His strength was returning, but so was his restlessness. The closer he came to recovery, the more distant he seemed. He spent long hours alone in his office, reviewing files and refusing help. Some nights, Lila heard the faint sound of glass breaking or a frustrated shout muffled behind a locked door. One evening, she found him sitting in the dark study, a shattered cup on the floor beside his wheelchair. "Ethan," she said softly, kneeling to pick up the pieces. "Leave it," he said sharply. "You will cut yourself." "Better that than feeling nothing." She froze. His voice was low, heavy with exhaustion. "You think recovery is victory," he said, staring at the flickering fire. "But it is torture. Every small success feels like a lie. My body moves, but my mind does not believe it." She placed a hand on his arm. "Then let it believe through you." He turned to her, eyes fierce. "You make it sound easy." "It is not," she said, her voice trembling. "But you are not alone in this." He looked at her for a long moment, then whispered, "I am afraid, Lila. Afraid that when I can finally stand again, you will leave." Her heart ached. "Why would I leave?" "Because this was never real," he said, his tone breaking. "This was a contract, a temporary promise. Once I can walk, you will have no reason to stay." Lila drew in a slow breath. "Do you really think I am still here because of a piece of paper?" He looked away. "I do not know what to think anymore." The next day, Ethan refused therapy altogether. He stayed locked in his room, ignoring calls and meals. By nightfall, Lila could not bear it. She opened the door without knocking. He was sitting near the window, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. "If you want to quit, then quit," she said quietly. "But do not lie to yourself. You are not afraid of pain, you are afraid of hope." He stared at her, silent. She walked closer. "You are terrified that if you let yourself believe in something again, you will lose it, so you pretend not to care." Her words hit him harder than she expected. His jaw clenched. "Do not speak like you understand." "I understand enough," she said, voice rising. "I lost my father to debt, my mother to fear, and myself to this arrangement. But you are losing yourself by choice." He turned sharply, pain flickering in his eyes. "Then why are you still here?" "Because I want to see you stand, not for the world, but for yourself." He stared at her, something shifting behind his guarded expression. "Finally," he said, almost in a whisper, "and if I fall?" She stepped closer. "Then I will be there to catch you, again and again, until you stop being afraid of standing." Silence filled the room. For the first time, he reached for her hand. His fingers trembled, but he held on. The next morning, Ethan returned to therapy. When Lila entered the gym, he was already there, gripping the bars with quiet determination. "You came," he said, without looking up. "I told you," she replied. "I do not give up easily." Hours passed. His arms shook, sweat dripped down his neck, but he refused to stop. Lila stayed by his side, whispering encouragement. "One more try, Ethan. You can do this." He took a breath, braced himself, and pushed upward. His legs trembled, knees locking for a single second, and then another. Slowly, unbelievably, he rose. Lila gasped, tears welling in her eyes. "You are standing?" she whispered. Ethan's chest heaved. He was pale, shaking, but smiling through it. "Am I dreaming?" "No," she said, stepping closer. "You are awake." He reached for her, losing balance, and she caught him. The moment their hands met, something wordless passed between them, relief, disbelief, love. His weight pressed against her, but she held firm. When he finally sat back down, breathing hard, he laughed a sound pure and boyish. "I felt it," he said. "For the first time, I really felt it." That night, neither of them slept. They sat together by the window, wrapped in quiet awe. Ethan looked at her, his voice low. "You were right. Hope hurts, but it also heals." Lila smiled faintly. "That is how you know it is real." As dawn broke, light spilled across the marble floor. Ethan turned toward her, eyes soft. "Lila," he said, "if tomorrow I could walk again, I would not need the chair. But I would still need you." Her heart skipped. "That is not what this was supposed to be." "I know," he said gently. "But maybe what was supposed to be was never meant for us." She looked at him for a long moment before whispering, "Then let us make our own reason to stay." Outside, the snow began to melt, and with it, the last traces of the walls they had both built. In the quiet glow of morning, two people who had once been strangers bound by contract finally understood something neither money nor power could buy: love that heals not because it fixes what is broken, but because it teaches you to believe again. The days following Ethan's first steps felt like living inside a fragile miracle. Every sound seemed brighter. Every moment carried meaning. For the first time in years, the Blake mansion echoed with something it had long forgotten: hope. Lila became part of his routine, not just as a caretaker, but as a quiet anchor. She would brew coffee while he practiced standing, count his steps, and help him keep his balance. There were still bad days when his legs refused to cooperate, when he fell and cursed his body, but he no longer faced them alone. One morning, as the sun poured through the tall windows, she found him standing by the piano, one hand braced on the lid for support. His face glistened with sweat, but his eyes burned with triumph. 2 minutes, he said, breathless. I stood for 2 minutes. Lila smiled, her voice trembling. That is longer than yesterday. He looked at her, eyes softening. It feels like more than that. Later that afternoon, a letter arrived. It was from the board of Blake Enterprises, summoning him to a shareholder meeting. It would be his first public appearance since the crash without a wheelchair. Ethan hesitated, reading the paper in silence. They want to see if I am still fit to lead, he said finally. They think my recovery is just a story. Then show them it is not, Lila replied. That evening, they rehearsed his walk down the hallway again and again. Each time she kept her hand near his back but never touched him unless he asked. It was his fight, his victory. When he stumbled, she said quietly, again. When he fell, she whispered, you are stronger than yesterday. By the time the meeting came, he was ready, or at least he believed he was. Lila helped him into his suit, her fingers steady as she adjusted his tie. Do not try to prove them wrong, she said. Just be the man you have already become. He met her gaze for a moment longer than necessary. What if I fall in front of them? Then you will stand up again, she answered simply. The meeting was held in the downtown corporate tower, the same place where he had once commanded every room. Now, as the elevator doors opened, a hush fell over the boardroom. All eyes turned to him. Ethan stepped forward slowly, his cane tapping against the marble floor. Mr. Blake, one of the older board members said cautiously, it is good to see you. Ethan nodded. It is good to be seen standing. The room rippled with nervous laughter, but respect followed. He delivered his report with calm authority, explaining the new medical initiative the foundation had launched, an idea inspired by Lila's compassion. When the presentation ended, silence turned into applause. Outside the building, reporters waited like vultures. Flashes burst the moment he and Lila stepped through the doors. One shouted, Mr. Blake, how did you manage to walk again? Ethan paused, tightening his grip on the cane. Then, instead of answering, he looked at Lila and said, because someone refused to let me give up. The next day, the photo of that moment appeared everywhere, Ethan standing tall beside the woman who had once been called his contract bride. Headlines read, the CEO who stood again for love. But behind the glory, whispers began to spread. A journalist claimed that Lila had manipulated the marriage to secure wealth. Another article suggested she had faked their love story for sympathy. The tabloids grew cruel. When Lila read the headlines, her hands shook. Ethan, I know, he interrupted gently. You do not have to defend yourself to me. But the world, let them talk, he said. I would rather they lie about you than know how much you mean to me. Still, the stories hurt. One night, she packed a small bag. When Ethan came into the room, she turned quickly, wiping her tears. You cannot leave, he said, his voice low but firm. I do not want to make things harder for you. You are not making anything harder, he said, stepping closer, his cane steady. You are the reason I can stand at all. She shook her head, eyes glistening. This was never supposed to be real. You gave me freedom, remember? The right to walk away. He reached for her hand. Then I am asking you not to use it. Her heart pounded. Why? Because I am not afraid anymore, he said. Not of falling, not of hope, not of loving you. The room fell silent. Outside, rain began to fall again, the same sound that had once marked the day of their wedding. But this time, it felt different. It was not sorrow. It was renewal. Slowly, she set the bag down. If I stay, she whispered, it will not be out of obligation. I know, he said. It will be because you want to. He took a trembling step toward her, then another. Without the cane, without the chair, just faith. When he reached her, she steadied him with both hands. Their eyes locked, and the distance between them disappeared. The man who had once lost everything had finally learned to stand not for the cameras, not for the company, but for the woman who taught him how. In that moment, the walls of the mansion seemed to breathe again. The lights softened, the storm outside faded, and for the first time since the day they met, Ethan and Lila were no longer pretending. They had started as a contract. They had become a cure. And now, they were something greater, two souls, who had fallen, risen, and learned that sometimes love is not about fixing what is broken, but about standing together even when the world wants you to fall. Winter turned into spring, and for the first time in years, the Blake mansion was alive with light. The staff smiled again. Music filled the corridors, and laughter occasionally escaped from the library, something no one had heard there since the accident. Ethan was walking now. Not perfectly, not without effort, but each step carried the quiet pride of a man who had earned every inch of progress. Lila was always beside him, her presence constant yet never overbearing. Their marriage had changed from contract to companionship, and from companionship into something deeper that neither dared to name. But peace never lasts long in a story like theirs. One afternoon, Ethan received a call from his mother, Margaret Blake, a woman whose voice could command boardrooms and crush reputations. "Ethan," she said coldly, "we need to talk, alone." When she arrived at the mansion, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. She looked at Lila with the sharp eyes of a woman used to assessing threats. "You are the one who married my son," she said. "The press calls you his miracle." Lila straightened. "I am his wife." Margaret's lips curved in a tight smile. "For now." Ethan stepped between them, leaning slightly on his cane. "Mother, that is enough." She ignored him. "You think I do not know why she stayed? Do you truly believe she loves you? You gave her access to our company, our home, our fortune. Do you even know her past?" Lila froze. "My past?" Margaret tossed a folder on the table. Inside were photos, old reports, and debt records from the years before Lila's marriage. "Your father's bankruptcy, the unpaid loans, the hospital bills. I cleaned up this mess to protect our name. You owe everything you have to us." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You had no right to dig into her life." "I had every right," his mother replied. "You are being manipulated by a woman who learned how to look helpless." Lila felt the sting of humiliation burn her throat. She turned toward Ethan, eyes shimmering. "Is that what you think too?" He looked torn, caught between love and doubt. "Lila, Before he could finish, she stepped back. "No, I understand. You needed to believe in something good, and I was convenient." She walked out of the room before he could stop her. That night, rain poured again, the same kind of storm that had marked every turning point in their story. Ethan searched the house, calling her name, but she was gone. Her room was empty except for a folded piece of paper on the desk. He unfolded it with shaking hands. "You once told me strength is standing when you cannot. So stand now, Ethan. Stand without me. If our love was real, it will not break, it will wait." The next morning, the mansion felt hollow again. Ethan moved through it like a ghost, forcing himself to attend meetings, therapy, and charity events. Outwardly, he looked stronger than ever. Inside, he was unraveling. One night, he found himself back in the therapy room, gripping the same metal bars where it all began. His reflection in the mirror stared back, steadier, older, lonelier. "You wanted me to stand," he whispered, voice cracking. "But not like this." He sank to his knees, pain flooding his chest not from his legs, but from the emptiness she had left behind. Then, as the wind howled outside, a faint memory surfaced, her voice saying, "You are stronger than yesterday." He pushed himself up, slowly, painfully, but this time without fear. When he finally stood, the tears in his eyes blurred the world, yet he smiled. Because now he understood she had not left to abandon him, she had left to let him prove that he could stand on his own. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived at the foundation addressed to Mr. Blake. Inside was a photo of a small community center under construction in a quiet coastal town. On the back, written in her handwriting, were the words, "For those learning to walk again in body or in heart." Ethan traced the ink with his thumb, feeling a surge of warmth. He turned toward the window, sunlight pouring in. "You did not run away," he whispered. "You kept walking." He stood taller that day. No cane, no fear. The world had taken so much from him: mobility, pride, and for a time, love. But it had also given him something he never thought he would find again: the will to keep going, even when the person who taught him how was no longer beside him. And though the room was silent, He could almost hear her voice echo softly through the light. "You are not alone, Ethan. You never were." Months passed. Spring deepened into summer, and the air over the city grew warm and full of light. The Blake Foundation expanded its reach faster than ever before. Every new program Ethan approved carried a quiet signature: her influence, her kindness, her spirit. Yet no one had seen Lila Anderson since the night she walked away. The media still speculated. Some said she had left for another country. Others whispered that she had taken the money and disappeared. But Ethan knew the truth. She had not vanished. She had simply gone where she was needed most. One morning, as he reviewed reports in his office, a young assistant entered, holding a letter. "This came for you from Harborville," she said. Ethan froze. Harborville, the name sounded like a memory. He opened the envelope with careful hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph. The picture showed a group of children in front of a newly built rehabilitation center, smiling wide. Behind them stood Lila, her hair tied back, sunlight washing over her face. She looked free. The note read, "The Open Hand Center is finished. We help veterans, single parents, and children learning to walk again. You once told me love means standing together. Here, we help others do the same." Ethan's throat tightened as he stared at her handwriting. He could almost hear her laugh between the lines, gentle and real. Without a second thought, he called his driver. "We are going to Harborville." The journey took 3 hours. As the car pulled up the coastal road, he saw the white building standing near the sea, the same one in the photo. Lila was outside, kneeling beside a young boy struggling to take his first step with braces. Her voice was calm and encouraging. "You can do it. Just one more step. I am right here." The boy stumbled, and she caught him, laughing softly. Ethan stood at a distance, watching. Every movement, every word she spoke, felt like home. When she finally turned and saw him, she froze. The wind carried the faint scent of salt and rain. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Ethan took a step forward, steady, sure, without the cane. "You found me," she said quietly. "I was never lost," he replied. "I was just learning how to walk to you." She smiled through her tears. "You are walking. And you," he said, "are still teaching people how to stand." They stood there in silence, surrounded by the sound of the sea and children's laughter. Finally, Lila whispered, "I was afraid you would hate me for leaving." "I could never hate the person who taught me how to live again," he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was the same ring she had worn on their wedding day. "You left before I could give this back properly," he said. "No contracts this time, no terms, just us." Her hand trembled as he slid the ring onto her finger. "You really want to do this again?" she asked softly. "Yes," he said, smiling. "But this time, we marry for love, not for duty." The boy beside them clapped his hands, not understanding but sensing the joy. The waves crashed gently behind them, and the wind seemed to whisper blessings across the shore. Ethan pulled her close, his voice low. "You once said hope hurts because it heals. You were right, but you forgot to add love stays because it forgives." She looked up at him, eyes shining. "Then let us stop running and start standing together." In that moment, surrounded by the children she had healed and the world he had rebuilt, the two people who had once been broken found their way back not to perfection but to peace. And as the sun dipped below the ocean, their shadows merged into one no longer bound by contract, no longer haunted by the past, but standing, finally, for love. The morning of their second wedding dawned bright and clear, the kind of day that felt written just for them. The garden behind the Open Hand Center was draped in white silk and soft petals. Children who had once struggled to walk now carried baskets of flowers, laughing as they scattered them along the aisle. The sea shimmered behind them, calm and endless. Ethan stood at the far end, wearing a light gray suit, no cane, no wheelchair, just the steady balance he had fought so hard to earn. His heart raced, not from weakness but from awe. Every step he had taken, every fall he had endured, had led him here. Then he saw her. Lila appeared at the garden's edge, walking toward him in a simple ivory dress that moved like light. The wind played with her hair, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. She met his gaze, and the faintest smile curved her lips, peaceful, knowing, complete. When she reached him, they did not speak at first. They simply looked at each other, as if trying to memorize the miracle of standing together again. The officiant cleared his throat gently. "Ethan and Lila, the first time you stood here, you were strangers bound by circumstance. Today, you are partners bound by choice." Ethan turned to her, his voice low but firm. "The first time I said I do, I was surviving. This time, I am living." Lila's eyes filled with tears. "The first time I stood beside a man I pitied. Today I stand beside the man I love." The crowd grew quiet as Ethan reached into his pocket and unfolded a small, worn piece of paper, their old contract. "This once defined us," he said. "Rules, limits, conditions. But love does not live in rules." He held it to a nearby candle, and the flame consumed it slowly. The paper curled into ash, carried away by the wind. Lila took his hands. "You once told me you were afraid I would leave when you stood again. But I am not here because you can walk. I am here because you finally believe you deserve to." He smiled, voice trembling with emotion. "And I am here because you taught me that strength is not measured by the distance we move, but by the courage it takes to stand still with someone." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan did not hesitate. He leaned in and kissed her, soft but certain. The children cheered, the guests clapped, and for the first time since his accident, Ethan felt whole not because his body was healed, but because his heart finally was. As the sun began to set, Lila whispered against his shoulder, "So, this is what freedom feels like." He nodded. "Yes. Freedom to stand, to love, to start again." They turned toward the horizon, hand in hand, their silhouettes framed by golden light. Behind them, the laughter of the children echoed, mingling with the rhythm of the sea. Their story had begun in pain, forged through loss, and tested by pride. But it ended where all true healing does not with perfection, but with peace. And as the final light of day touched their faces, a single truth remained. Love had not just helped them stand. It had taught them how to walk forward, together, for the rest of their lives.